popularly known as, just for this occasion, Chambu.
Thank you very much for that very warm introduction, and I'm glad that you followed the precedent that had been set to be brief, which didn't allow you to also go to the other dimension about the relations, the fact that, among other things, we're also comrades. Thank you very much. I think as far as following the precedent, it's only the aspect about the protocol that I will follow, because if I told you that I would be brief, maybe I would be stretching the concept of brevity a bit, given the speech that I have with me here. So let me just also join you all in acknowledging the already established protocol. Of course, our chairman, my good friend and brother, Kojo Bensiencio, who I'm really pleased to be meeting today. I think the Council of Foreign Relations have done a good job by reuniting us, if I may put it that way. And we also, of course, acknowledge the President of the Council, Ambassador D.K. Osei, otherwise known as D.K. I see here so many distinguished excellencies. Let me acknowledge, of course, the Chief of Defense Staff, who is here with us, many senior ambassadors, General Coleman, and other senior retired officers, and of course, our own Aki is here with us in the audience. I want to acknowledge Aki and Professor Tichwa Menu, and so many personal friends of mine in the audience. Distinguished and honorable ladies and gentlemen, I'm very grateful for the invitation and delighted to be amongst you at this impressive event. I'm humbled and inspired by the pedigree of the audience, composed of the captains and veterans of Ghanaian diplomacy, and of course from other fields. Talking about the veterans of Ghanaian diplomacy, some of whom possess first-hand and deep knowledge of the subject matter of today's topic. I think the snippets that Ambassador Osei has just given you in his short remarks tells you that this is a topic about which they are very conversant. And if you permit me a moment of self-examination, I'm confident you'll agree with my acknowledgement of the immense debt that I owe to this distinguished community of practice that is encapsulated in the Council of Foreign Relations. Looking back, it is for me a deep and formative connection, and addressing you today is a continuation of my effort to pay an irredeemable debt to the community of Ghanaian diplomacy. I would like to begin my remarks by joining the long list of those who have recognized and applauded the vision and passion behind the Council of Foreign Relations, CFR. The CFR affords Ghana a unique and dedicated platform for discussing international affairs, the analysis and review of foreign policy and international relations. The CFA is a veritable instrument for the analysis of geostrategic dynamics for the purposes of reviewing and shaping a forward-looking foreign policy for Ghana. This August Council is a workshop, it will be, of Ghana's international relations, worthy of our deep appreciation and unflinching support. The first task I have set for myself today is to dispel any possible anxieties you might have that this UN official is about to subject you to several citations and references to Security Council and General Assembly resolutions, presidential statements, and references to the several reports of the Secretary General. No, you can be assured that there will be no such sophistry today. My simpler, though more important objective is one of advocacy for peace, to outline an agenda for building partnership for peace in West Africa and the Sahel. To be sure, the notion that partnerships are essential for peace is not new. The report of the Advisory Group of Experts for the 2015 Review of UN Peace Building Architecture, titled Challenge of Sustaining Peace, has already acknowledged that, and I quote here, closer strategic and operational partnerships must be prioritized and deepened, end of quote. My main task today, therefore, is to sketch out the litany of partnerships for peace in the region of West Africa and the Sahel, identify the opportunities for such partnerships and the challenges with which they are confronted. Indeed, today's topic on partnership for peace is an organic one for this Council, which has itself been described by His Excellency President Nana Akufo-Addo as, quote, a formidable partnership with state and non-state actors alike to set and deepen the agenda of public discourse and shape national, regional, continental, and global conversations. And in the words of Honorable Shirley Ayoko-Botwe, Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Relations, who was speaking at the inauguration of this Council, I believe you were charged with, quote, maintenance of peace and security through the rule of law, human rights, democratic governance, and dimensional human development to support the UN SDGs 2030 and Africa's Agenda 2063 towards the Africa that we want, end of quote. The second part of my remarks will comprise a snapshot of peace and security challenges in this region and why and what partnerships are essential for sustaining peace in the sub-region. The third part will deal with issues that need to be addressed to enhance the prospects and impact of partnerships for peace and what the challenges are to building partnerships for peace. The fourth part will center on opportunities to explore in form of recommendations. The conclusion that is drawn is that given the current and future dynamics and ramifications of conflict, no single entity, be it state, regional, international, or non-state, is capable of responding to these challenges alone. Several actors are indeed necessary, and building a coalition of the like-minded and committed is unavoidable. The prospects for peace are therefore ultimately defined by the quality of partnerships as measured by inclusivity, consensus, capacity, and anchored on national, not merely state, ownership. Given the potential implications of dynamics in neighboring countries on peace and security in Ghana, it is imperative that the country pays particular attention to its regional diplomacy through effective partnerships within the framework of ECOWAS. Thus, strengthening the national social contract with non-state actors to bridge the gap between state and society, and with neighboring countries to promote and strengthen the regional peace and security architecture through layered partnership building, represents a major and essential pathway for peace. Now let me look at the ecosystem of peace and security in West Africa and the Sahel. West Africa and the Sahel manifest a complex network of interconnected actors and factors that determines the character, intensity, and threats of conflict to peace and security. Defined by socio-economic and political contestations, demographics, climate change, urbanization, as well as geostrategic calculations and transnational trends. This ecosystem is determinant to the agenda of building partnerships for peace. At the very foundation of this ecosystem are governance deficits that revolve around a historical, disarticulated relationship between state and society, and a resultant lack of inclusiveness and accountability. This is often manifested in inter-ethnic disputes, violent extremism, and antagonistic political tensions. Increasingly, there is an emerging trend of the misuse and manipulation of the instruments of democracy, self-centered constitutional reviews, especially involving term limits or elimination of opponents from contesting elections, and perpetuation of a winner-takes-all syndrome. We also witness the polarization of security, politicization of security institutions, and a culture of impunity and systematic human rights violations, with women and children bearing the brunt. To worsen the situation, formal democracy is not yielding the anticipated development dividends, leading to popular disenchantment and resistance from below. West Africa and the Sahel continue to grapple with conflicts spurred by the interactions between farmers and herders. Over time, these conflicts, mostly driven by the scarcity of resources, including water and fodder, have been highly politicized and have become deadlier with dire consequences on the civilian population. In its July 2018 report, the International Crisis Group reported that over 1,300 people were killed in the first 6 months of 2018 as a result of farmer-herder conflicts in Nigeria, which was roughly 6 times the number of persons reportedly killed by Boko Haram over the same period. Given the demographic composition of countries in the region, which includes both pastoralists and farmers, and the nomadic nature of herders and their activities, immediate and adequate measures are needed to prevent clashes and to find lasting solutions. Unfortunately, the pressure exerted by climate change on communities will test their resilience, and if not well handled, will continue to trigger these kinds of conflicts. The Sahel in particular, a region of approximately 150 million people, with a fertility rate ranging between 4.1 and 7.6 children per woman, and considered the fastest growing in the world, is experiencing a surge in violence and increased insecurity that has created a humanitarian crisis of alarming proportions, despite efforts by member states and partners to contain it. A spiraling demographic surge, climate change, and associated pressures on land and water resources have led to a spike in radicalization and intercommunal tensions and violence. Recent figures of the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project, ACLED, indicate an increase in fatalities and conflict incidents over the past 5 months, with at least 5,000 reported fatalities, thus representing a 46% increase compared to the same period last year. ACLED states that conflict in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso is the main driver of this surge in violence. The national and regional ramifications of violent extremism and terrorism in the Sahel and West Africa constitutes a real and present threat to us all. The causes are multifaceted. Nationally and regionally, the Sahel is characterized by weak institutions and the absence of state services, especially in peripheral areas, joint state capacity, and dependent regional alliances. Geostrategic interests of foreign entities, nations, and corporations have turned the region into a battleground for resource control. These structural weaknesses have created a fertile ground for the emergence of extremist groups such as Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, affiliates of Al-Qaeda, and more recently, ISIL. The situation is exacerbated by the activities of criminal syndicates operating in areas with little or no state presence and making huge profits from their illicit activities. UNODC estimates that since 2006, 20 to 40 tons of cocaine a year have transited through the region to Europe, with 20 tons valued at $1 billion, which exceeds the GDP of some of our countries in West Africa. Addressing this multi-pronged and evolving threat will require the nurturing and strengthening of constructive partnerships at all levels: local, national, sub-regional, regional, and international. This is especially urgent given the complex political transitions we are witnessing in Algeria, Libya, and Sudan. A positive aspect of democratic consolidation in West Africa and the Sahel has been the regularity with which elections are organized. There's evidence of a wide acceptance and realization by countries across the region that transparent and credible elections remain the most viable, legal, and legitimate form of access to power. We recently concluded presidential elections in Nigeria, in Senegal, and legislative elections in Guinea-Bissau, and they were all largely peaceful and fairly credible. We're hopeful that upcoming elections next year, I was just in Cote d'Ivoire, has been told by Ambassador Say, in the context of the preparations for elections there, and I was saying there that next year will be an election year of elections in West Africa, because we'll have our own elections, of course, in Ghana. There's also in Niger, in Togo, in Cote d'Ivoire, in Burkina Faso, in Guinea. And some of these could be fairly contentious. But our expectation is that they all follow the trend emerging in the region of peaceful, participative, credible elections. Nonetheless, we cannot be oblivious to the fact that the winner-takes-all attitude towards elections as maintenance of power becomes the ultimate avenue for patronage, have increased the stakes in electoral processes, making them a major source of pre- and post-election related violence, driven by intra- and inter-party dynamics and the instrumentalization of identity, electoral management bodies, and security agencies to achieve a purpose, a particular purpose suiting parties. Unfortunately, Ghana is not exempt from this, as recent events have once again amplified the phenomenon of political vigilantism. The equation we must resolve is that of ensuring a conversation between the relevant stakeholders to see elections for what they are, a battleground of ideas and policies and programs where there's bound to be at the end of the process a winner and a loser, and an opportunity to bring all together for moving the country forward. not a situation to instigate and foment hatred and violence against opponents and communities. A life lost during an electoral period is a death too many and undercuts the very essence of participatory democracy and governance. And that is why we should hope that many more African politicians would emulate the example of former Nigerian President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan, who coined the phrase, and I quote, "My political ambition is not worth spilling a single drop of any citizen," end of quote. Now let me turn to the building of partnerships. What has become manifestly clear is that a comprehensive approach to address the ecosystem of peace and security I have outlined goes beyond any single intervention. Growing out of this complex ecosystem of peace and security in West Africa and the Sahel, therefore, I would like to focus on why partnerships are important and what type of partnerships should be built. International peace and security is a shared responsibility. So too is regional peace and stability. Regardless of the might and the resources of any given country in the region, peace and security cannot be underwritten by a state alone, but by the collective efforts of states and the collective will and involvement of the populations. And if we had any doubts, I think they've been dispelled by the fact that the ragtag Boko Haram has fought the mighty Nigeria more or less to a halt. So it's important that we see how working together we can face some of these security challenges. In this regard, efforts to sustain and build peace can only be guaranteed through partnerships at the communal, national, and regional levels. The key point is to be made here is that from a human security perspective, ensuring security is beyond the capacity of any individual actor or entity. We therefore need partnerships at various concentric levels, from the communities to the national, to the regional, continental, and indeed global levels. While due recognition should be given to the indispensable role of states in guaranteeing and promoting their sovereignty, the nature of the current threats to peace and security, their cross-border and cross-cutting nature, impose the need for partnerships if they are to be fully and comprehensively addressed. To be sure, violent extremists, and for that matter, transnational organized crime, do not operate within the confines of well-defined borders, but cross territories in pursuit of their objectives. Therefore, addressing such threats requires us to develop appropriate policies and tools that would cut across borders. For this to happen, partnership is vital. The state needs, therefore, to collaborate with citizens and communities, including civil society, within its own borders, as well as other states and regional actors. A common reading of security threats through joint horizon scanning and consensus on response options, including preventive action, messaging, and direct intervention, as well as the predictable division of labor based on comparative advantage, are key to effective prevention and resolution of conflicts and joint engagements. Partnership for peace would be stronger, durable, and more effective if they are premised on mutually agreed objectives and widely recognized and accepted norms and standards. Partnerships to address the systemic violation of human rights, which often are the root causes of conflict, would be more effective if they align with international human rights standards as they promote clarity as to the roles and responsibilities of the different actors involved. Now, on building national partnership for peace. Beyond the state-to-state and regional partnership, a range of partnership within West African states themselves is also essential for preventing conflict and sustaining peace, predicated ultimately on the quality of the social contract. Ghana presents an instructive illustration of requisite internal partnerships for peace and the issues arising in this regard. Ghana's evolving national peace architecture, epitomized by the National Peace Council, has become a reference mechanism and template across the continent. I can testify that the UN worked with Nigerian stakeholders to enable them put up a similar National Peace Council. They call this the National Peace Committee, headed by former President General Abdulsalam Abubakar. And they've gone further now to have legislation actually backing it. And all of that inspired by the example in Ghana. The constructive role of traditional institutions and mechanisms working in tandem with state institutions, civil society, religious leaders, etc., in the resolution of the decades-old Dagbon crisis demonstrates the resilience of institutions at the local levels. The Independent National Commission, the National Electoral Commission, and its supporting inter-party committee, IPAC, constitute impressive, inclusive, and consensual building blocks for the sustenance of peace in Ghana. In them, Ghana possesses a priceless set of principles and practices that it can share with neighboring countries in partnership building. And I recall here former President John Mahama, who led the ECOWAS election mission to Liberia in December 2017, strongly recommending to Liberians to adopt the practice and to also create a National Peace Council as a mechanism to prevent future and many of the issues that came up in the post-election period in December 2017 in Liberia. So Ghana is widely regarded as a beacon of democratic consolidation and good governance on the African continent. Democratic transfer and alternation of power based on competing political parties seem fairly established as an essential part of such political commonwealth. Ghana has been able to create and sustain the institutionalization of power and political transitions by ensuring the establishment of strong and independent institutions, justice and security systems, a largely effective civil society, civil administration, and systems of public governance, all essentially within the broader framework of rule of law and human rights. Indeed, the 2016 elections were exemplary in forging partnerships for establishing the efficacy of a national peace architecture. Recently, Otumfuo the Asantehene has given some insight into his mediation role during the 2016 elections, an appreciable role that I know he had played even in previous elections too. And here again, Ghanaian civil society organizations such as Coalition of Domestic Election Observers, CODIA, General is here with us, West Africa Network of Peace Builders, One Up Ghana, Emmanuel and his people, the Women's Situation Room, and think tanks such as the Center for Democratic Governance, the Institute for Democratic Governance, the Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center, and professional bodies such as the Ghana Bar Association, the Ghana Journalists Association, all collaborated with sub-regional, regional, and international partners to prevent post-election conflict and to sustain peace in Ghana. No wonder Ghana has featured as the fastest growing economy in Africa and one of the 3 fastest growing in the world since those elections. Figures from the World Bank indicate an economic growth of 8.1% in 2017 and a revised figure which is projected 7.4 in 2019. I doubt this would have been the case had the country been plunged into post-election crisis following the 2016 presidential elections. For we all know that there is an inextricable link between peace and security and development. However, the phenomenon of political vigilantism, as demonstrated during the parliamentary by-election in Ayawaso West Wogo constituency earlier this year, illustrates 2 main issues with regard to peace. First is the importance of the political economy of peace. Peace is not sustainable within a broader context of economic. Let me take that again. Peace is not sustainable within a broader context of economic polarization and inequality. While Ghana is indeed witnessing impressive economic growth, by several measures, this is associated with and is resulting in a very rapid economic polarization relative to other African countries. And this has been pointed out by the UN Rapporteur for Ghana in his report. Ghana spends 50% less than its continental peers on social protection. Relatively, therefore, as a Ghanaian, you are more or less on your own. 1 in 5 Ghanaians live in poverty. More than a quarter of Ghanaian children, indeed 28%, live in poverty. And 1 in 8 Ghanaians live in extreme poverty. This runs counter to the collective vision of a country and its commitment to the SDGs and other development objectives. The net result is an available cadre of Ghanaians who have become economically disenfranchised and who are vulnerable to political manipulation. A second major issue raised by political vigilantism is the need for partnership in addressing the phenomenon, which is multidimensional, both in cause and in effect. The seeming resilience of the political vigilantes means that it is beyond the reach of the political parties, and indeed the government alone handling it. It calls for national efforts involving multiple partners incorporating the government, political parties for sure, security agencies, the judiciary, the media, communities, civil society, and indeed the deployment of Ghana's national architecture for peace, including the crucial role of traditional and religious leaders in national and subnational institutions. In the current environment, the nation should consider triggering the entire instruments within the national peace architecture to address the challenges of political vigilantism beyond legalistic approaches. I should commend the initiative of President Mahama and of former President, the initiative of President Nana Akufo-Addo and of former President John Mahama and their political parties, especially NDC and MPP, who after all created this phenomenon for us, to work collaboratively to bring to an end the phenomenon of vigilantism before it turns into a monster that can no longer be controlled, throws the country into violence and destruction, and destroys the huge reputation of Ghana. In order to sustainably respond to the phenomenon of vigilantism void of partisanship, the United Nations remains committed to lending support to the ongoing national efforts led by the National Peace Council and remains hopeful that all parties will participate in reaching a consensual agreement in comprehensively addressing this phenomenon. At the regional level, partnership with other West African states and with regional organizations are essential for Ghana and indeed any country to ensure its territorial integrity and to provide a secure environment for Ghanaian citizens and the Ghanaian state. The potential spread of terrorist-related activities into parts of northern Togo, Ghana, and Benin, as the situation in Burkina Faso deteriorates, demonstrates the need for partnership in addressing insecurity in the current context. Ghana should go beyond the proverb, when your neighbor's beard catches fire, be wise to keep water close by yours. No, Ghana should actively help the neighbor to douse the flames in his beard. The recent gathering of the heads of states of Ghana, Togo, Benin, Burkina Faso, which was attended also by the Vice President of Côte d'Ivoire and convened by President Nana Akufo-Addo, is illustrative of such partnerships at the leadership level. On the social and economic front, Ghana cannot survive as an island of prosperity in the midst of regional economic collapse. Her active participation and influence within the regional integration process is therefore a matter of necessity and not of choice. Ghana needs to scale up her role and influence in regional, continental, and global multilateral institutions, including ECOWAS, the African Union, the UN, and other international organizations. The country possesses an array of credentials and tools in these efforts. These include a role as a consistent troop-contributing country to the UN, a founding member of ECOWAS, and of course the AU, through the former OAU, state champion of the SDGs, and of course her democratic credentials and a progressively improving investment climate. Ghana should also prioritize the promotion of her citizens into these organizations through a deliberate policy, including sponsoring young and enterprising talents, lobbying, and partnership with friendly countries. Now, turning to UN and global partnership. At the global and regional levels, the UN depends on and engages with regional and national institutions as building blocks of global peace and security within the framework of Chapter 8 of its Charter. It leverages its comparative advantage, convening power, global reach, and the array of norms, resources, and tools at its disposal in complementarity with national and regional efforts. Its modus operandi entails a multi-dimensional set of partnerships related to peace and security. In this regard, our partnership with the African Union and ECOWAS are key. Within the framework of the SDGs 2030, aligning itself with the AU Agenda 2063. For West Africa, the United Nations Office for West Africa and Sahel, that I'm in charge with, is constantly working in building its partnership at all levels. We've been able to build strategic partnerships with continental, regional, and national institutions and authorities, civil society organizations, and community-based groups, while managing increasingly complex negotiations on the basis of subsidiarity and complementarity. In both the Lake Chad Basin and the Sahel, UNOWAS is supporting existing regional structures of ECOWAS and the AU, while at the same time working with the new regional entities, such as the Multinational Joint Task Force of the LCBC and the G7 Sahel Force of the G7 countries. Our ability to leverage on the robust regional framework on conflict prevention and management developed under the auspices of ECOWAS has been the cornerstone of our relationship with ECOWAS. Through this relationship and the use of various tools and mechanisms provided by the ECOWAS conflict prevention framework, we have, in close partnership, been able to engage national authorities and stakeholders in averting crises or preventing them from getting worse. I will illustrate with a few examples. First, in the Gambia, joint visits of the ECOWAS, the AU, and my office represent the UN to engage all stakeholders prior to the December 2016 elections led to the holding of successful presidential elections which were won by the coalition led by Adama Barrow, ushering in the current new democratic dispensation in the country. Second, in Sierra Leone, in the immediate post-election period, political tensions mounted, with clashes between the Sierra Leone People's Party, SLPeople, and the All People's Congress, APC, party activists. Two missions were then undertaken on different occasions by the ECOWAS Commission President, Jean-Claude Roux, and I, in a joint ECOWAS-UN effort to douse tensions. We engaged in quiet diplomacy, meeting both President Madabio and former President Ernest Bai Koroma to get them to calm down their followers and to let peace reign in the country. Thirdly, in both Nigeria and Senegal, during the presidential elections of 2019, again, President of the Electoral Commission, of the ECOWAS Commission, and I undertook joint ECOWAS UN missions to Nigeria and Senegal, where we met the candidates, the Electoral Commission, security agencies, civil society, and international partners in our common aim of ensuring the holding of inclusive, peaceful, credible elections. And while it will be presumptuous to claim credit for prevention of conflict or the sustenance of peace in all these instances, it is fair to insist that mobilizing all these key stakeholders to work for the sustenance and preservation of peace, security, consolidation of democracy demonstrates the solid partnership between the ECOWAS and the UN, and of course other important partners in contributing to the consolidation of peace and security in the sub-region. Here, let me look at the agenda item for Partnership for Peace. The proposed agenda herein for building peace partnerships are not prescriptive dictates. In the final analysis, partnerships are context-specific, emanating from and dependent on several variables. Rather, the proposed agenda for peace represent key principles that enhance the prospects, viability, and sustainability of building partnerships for peace. Concentric circle of partnerships. Partnerships are best built as concentric circles of relationships among communities, states, regional, global partners. A major item on the agenda for Partnership for Peace is to consider what combination of partnerships are required and in what combination. In most instances, Partnership for Peace extends beyond any one circle of engagement. So So we could start at state level, but soon it may have to involve sub-regional actors, continental actors, and why not? If it scales up, it could even get to level of Security Council. National ownership. While global and regional norms and actors are helpful, partnership for peace should be driven by national priorities, dynamics, and context. Otherwise, neither the partnership nor its outcomes would be sustainable. National mechanisms are key, such as national peace architecture. In this regard, it is important to stress the national ownership, that national ownership extends beyond the role of the state and the government and includes all major elements of the social contract. Inclusion. It should include and involve all the communities and stakeholders, not only ethnic, but gender, but most important also the vulnerable in the society. It is important to underscore that partnership for peace must be underpinned by the principles of inclusion and meaningful participation of all stakeholders through ensuring the involvement of all segments of the population, including women and youth, or especially women and youth, civil society, and other peace actors. Institutions are key. Partnership for peace should not only be driven by, but should contribute to the enhancement, the strengthening of institutions at various concentric circle levels of engagement, community level, national, regional, and global, must work to build strong institutions that will stand the test of time. Framework of rule of law and human rights. Partnership for peace are best placed within the framework of rule of law and human rights. Experience has shown that impunity and widespread violations of human rights retard the prospects for and are indeed obstacles to conflict prevention and sustaining peace. Regarding the challenges facing building of partnership for peace, let me state here that regardless of our good intentions, we're bound to encounter numerous challenges in building partnerships for peace. For instance, while conflict prevention is normatively attractive, it does not possess the shock and awe of peacekeeping, and therefore does not rapidly attract the requisite financial support. In addition, the discrepancies in prioritization of member states and in the understanding of the importance of peace, the vision for peace, makes the idea of partnership for peace somewhat challenging. These differences ultimately forestall attempts to generate a national and regional response to threats to peace and security. In addition, partnerships are often predicated on unequal power relationships. Consequently, the interests of the stronger and bigger partner could prevail at the expense of the other. Building partnerships for peace within the context of disparity in resources, power, and interest may further complicate existing or generate new conflicts. To be sure, not all partnerships are necessarily benevolent. We must be mindful of the conflicting nature of some partnerships, as well as their medium and long-term implications. We are noticing the increasing use of militia groups by national and international actors with mixed results at best, especially within the context of the fight against terrorism. These groups have, in some cases, become de facto agents of the state, and at other times, challengers of statutory security institutions. Only 2 weeks ago, one of the militia groups in Mali, was calling upon the state security services to withdraw from parts of Mali. So as we say in Ghana, who is who? Yes. This is a worrying trend throughout the region, where the state appears to share its security obligations with non-state actors. There have been echoes of such ambivalent relationships in Ghana, Burkina Faso, Guinea, Mali, Niger, and Nigeria. This is a continuing challenge to partnerships for peace. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, distinguished friends, as we focus on threats in our region, some of which are existential, we should be constantly reminded that the West Africa and Sahel region is not only a collection of states, but also a collection of societies. For sustainable peace, therefore, there should be a community. For sustainable states, therefore, there should not be only a community of states on the one hand, but also a community of states and societies tied together by a consultative and inclusive social contract, which must not only be legal, but also legitimate. States are indispensable and unavoidable for preventing conflict and sustaining peace. But we cannot achieve peace by statutory fiat. Partnership between state and society and communities, civil society, is an essential bridge. Inclusion remains central in partnerships from both a political and strategic perspective. It entails wide representation of the traditionally less representative groups in the society, such as women and youth, as well as reaching out to the less conventional peace actors, such as the private sector, which remains a partner with an added value in terms of resource mobilization. And our private sector needs to more and more contribute to the building of peace. Because as we often remind them, and that was the case recently in Nigeria, they are the first beneficiaries of a peaceful and stable environment. They are the ones producing the millionaires and the billionaires. So they cannot be aloof to the effort at building peace and stability. No less important are customary actors which have long history in communities. Diplomacy retains its crucial role in establishing and maintaining partnerships for peace, both nationally and internationally. In interstate engagements, in pursuit of peace, could harness significant benefits from expertise and resources that lie within the diplomatic service. We should systematically leverage such experience and expertise in national peace architecture and initiative. Ghana has an impressive track record in contributing to peace and security in the region and beyond, either through the service of its own sons and daughters or through regional and international institutions within which it always played an important role. This partnership with other states within the Committee of Nations has made Ghana stronger, more prosperous, and safer. In this regard, Ghanaian diplomacy should play a key role in sharing the Ghanaian model of conflict prevention to the region and beyond. Foreign policy should aim at developing the institutional capacity and the capacity of actors involved in conflict prevention, as this has the potential of developing more structured, result-oriented, and mutually beneficial partnerships for peace. In conclusion, as aptly illustrated in the UN World Bank Joint Report, Pathways to Peace, which I highly recommend to you. The human and economic cost of conflict around the world requires all concerned to work more collaboratively. This is also true for our region. Therefore, partnership is key, inclusion is indispensable for conflict prevention and sustaining peace. Several actors are indeed necessary, but none is singularly sufficient for peace. The quality of partnerships are interlinked at various concentric circles. And these multi-layered and multi-dimensional partnerships represent a major and essential pathway to peace. I thank you for your attention.